In this video clip you will learn how to use page 1 or task 1 of the planning document for your report. So in task 1 the idea is that you're going to develop a step-by-step procedure or method that will then be used to carry out an investigation. Usually you'll be given the purpose of the investigation that you're going to carry out. For this one here we've got some background information and then the purpose. So the teacher will usually give you this information. Methanol is a type of alcohol that can be used as a fuel to heat objects. The distance between the object and the fuel has an effect on the time it takes to heat. So the purpose of our investigation is going to be to investigate how the distance or height between a beaker of water and methanol fuel affects the time taken for the water to boil. Now using that purpose we then fill out the rest of the planning sheet. So remember you will be given the purpose by the teacher and then you use that information to fill out the rest of the planning sheet. First of all we write a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is a guess about what you think will happen and why. So if we have a look at the purpose here, it says that we're going to be investigating how the distance or the height between some water and a fuel will affect the time taken for the water to boil. Okay, so I'm just going to make up a hypothesis. It doesn't have to be correct, it's just a guess. So I'm going to say, I think that the closer the beaker of water is to the fuel, the less time it will take for the water to boil. That's just my guess. Your guess might be something different, and that's completely fine. Now we look down here at the planning part. So for the planning part, you need to say what you're going to be changing and how, what you're measuring and how, and what you're keeping the same and how. These are called variables. So the independent variable is the thing that you are changing and how you're changing that thing. So if we look back at the purpose, we can get that information. So it says in the purpose, we are investigating how the distance or the height between the beaker of water and the methanol fuel will affect the time taken for the water to boil. So the thing that we are changing is going to be the height between the beaker of water and the methanol fuel. So I'm going to highlight that in yellow. And what you could do is, if you're on a computer, you could copy and paste that part into here, or you could just handwrite it if you're not on a computer. So we can say we are changing the distance or height between the beaker of water and the methanol fuel. So that has answered the first part where we've said what we're doing, and then we need to say how we're going to do that as well. So we will do this by, and this is where it's important to know what your equipment setup is going to look like. Now I know for this experiment that I'm going to have a clamp stand, and that clamp stand is going to hold a beaker of water, and then below the beaker of water is where I'm going to put the methanol fuel burner. So I know that I can adjust the height of the clamp stand to adjust the height of the beaker of water. So if you don't know this information, you'll need to ask, or you'll need to work out what would be the most logical equipment setup. So we will do this by adjusting the height of the water beaker above the fuel burner on a clamp stand. For example, 5 centimeters above, 10 centimeters above, 15 centimeters above, and 20 centimeters above the burner. Okay, it's important to put some kind of value in there. Even if you change it later, it doesn't matter, but having something in there means that you know what you're talking about. Okay, now we look at the dependent variable. So this is the thing that we are measuring in the experiment and how. Now you could argue here that we're going to be measuring the heights, that's fine, but that actually links into what you're changing. So that's part of the independent variable. The thing that we're measuring is going to be the thing in the experiment itself. So we are looking at the time taken for the water to boil. So I'm going to highlight that in a different colour so that we can see. And again, you can copy and paste that down or just handwrite it into this spot and then make that into a complete sentence. So we will measure the time taken for the water to boil. And that answers the first part of the question, where where it says what are you measuring and how, and then we need to say how we're going to measure that. So we will measure this using a stopwatch to time how long it takes until there are rolling bubbles of water in the beaker. Okay. Righto, moving on to the control variables. So these are the things that you need to keep the same, and you need to explain what you're keeping the same and how you're keeping it the same. So one of the things that would probably be important to keep the same would be the amount of water that we're going to be using. So we'll put the amount of water used to boil, and you need to say how. So you can say we will use 100, actually 100 might be a bit too much, 50 mils of water for each trial and each height, because we want to try and keep this as a fair test. So to do that, things have to be kept the same. So we've said what we're keeping the same and then how we're keeping it the same. We need to pick another one. So the size of the beaker, that's going to affect our results, because obviously if we have a big beaker, then it's going to spread the water out a bit more, and so it'll go quicker than if we have a small beaker. So the size of the beaker, we will use a 100 milliliter beaker for each trial. What else could affect our results? We need something else that we're going to control. Now that could be pretty much anything, but something that probably I would consider would be when to stop the stopwatch at the boiling stage. So that would be important because everyone's ideas of boiling might be a bit different. So my idea of boiling would be that there are rolling bubbles. So we will stop the stopwatch when there are rolling bubbles, not just fizzy looking bubbles. Because I've seen a lot of people who confuse boiling with just being those fizzy looking bubbles, but that's not actually boiling. So those are my control variables. I've said what I'm keeping the same and how. Finally, for this part of the planning stage, we need to say how will we keep our experiment accurate. So how will you control for errors or bias? Now this is important if you want to get a really high mark in your assessment. You need to make sure that you fill in this part. So you can say something along the lines of, we will repeat each height trial 3 times and remove any outliers. Then we will average the results. So that takes away the chances of having any funny results or having any flukes. So that's keeping it accurate. How are we controlling for errors or bias? We will avoid parallax error. You can watch a different video clip to learn about parallax error. So we will avoid parallax error by checking measurements on the ruler or beaker by looking from eye level at the value points. Again, watch another video about parallax error to find out what I mean by that. And when measuring liquids, we will read the value from the bottom of the meniscus. Now if you can't remember what a meniscus is, you might need to look that up. So hopefully from this you will have worked out how to fill in that task 1 stage of the planning document. In the next video clip we'll look at writing the actual method and how we use this information that we've just gathered to put into that method.